John had always dreamed of running his own restaurant. Ever since he was a young boy, he loved cooking, experimenting with flavors, and watching people enjoy the meals he created. After years of hard work, saving every penny he could, and taking small loans, he finally managed to open his own little restaurant in the heart of the city. At first, things went well. The restaurant had a cozy atmosphere, delicious food, and friendly staff. People from nearby offices, families, and students often came to enjoy his meals. John was proud. Every evening, as he looked around at happy customers chatting and laughing, he felt like all his sacrifices had been worth it. But over the past year, things had changed. The city had seen new restaurants opening everywhere, some offering fancier meals, while others undercut prices to attract customers. Slowly, John noticed fewer people coming in. Bills for rent, electricity, and supplies started piling up, and the small savings he had were beginning to vanish. Even though he worked from early morning until late at night, it seemed like the money he earned could barely cover his expenses. The stress weighed heavily on him, but he refused to give up. He still believed in his dream, in his cooking, and in the restaurant he had built from the ground up. John's staff depended on him too. There were 2 chefs and a few waiters who counted on their monthly salaries to support their families. John couldn't bear the thought of letting them go, even though he sometimes had to delay his own payments. Every day, he tried to stay optimistic, telling himself that if he just worked a little harder, things would improve. But reality was harsh. Sometimes, after the last customer left, he would sit alone in the empty restaurant, staring at the bills scattered across the counter, wondering how he would pay for next month's rent. The dream he had cherished for so long now felt fragile, almost slipping through his fingers. Despite all the challenges, John never lost his kindness and generosity. He often gave leftover food to people in need and treated his staff like family. Even though he was struggling, he always greeted every customer with a smile and tried to make their experience special. People who knew him admired his dedication and warmth, but admiration alone didn't pay the bills. The community loved him, yet the harsh reality of running a small business in a competitive city made every day a fight for survival. John's personal life was affected as well. He couldn't spend as much time with his family or friends because he was constantly thinking about the restaurant. Nights were the hardest, when the loneliness of financial struggle and the fear of losing everything would press down on him. There were moments when he considered closing the restaurant, but something inside him always held on. He remembered the early days when he first opened the doors, the first positive reviews, the smiles of satisfied customers. Those memories reminded him why he had started this journey. Even in the midst of financial pressure, John had small sources of hope. He experimented with new dishes, hoping to attract more customers. Sometimes he tried special promotions, giving discounts or offering new menu items to draw attention. He also reached out to friends and local suppliers, seeking advice and support wherever he could. Though progress was slow, he refused to let despair take over. Every small win, like a positive comment from a customer or a day with slightly higher sales, felt like a sign that things could get better. John's life at that moment was a mixture of hope, struggle, and determination. Every day was a challenge, but he faced it with courage. He knew that success didn't come overnight, and he was ready to fight for his dream no matter what. The city was tough, but John's spirit was tougher. He believed that if he kept working hard and doing the right things, opportunities would come his way. Little did he know, a life-changing event was about to occur, something that would completely alter the course of his life and prove that even in the darkest moments, hope and kindness could lead to incredible surprises. The day had started like any other, with John juggling deliveries, checking inventory, and making sure the few customers who came in were satisfied. But by mid-afternoon, the sky began to change. What had been a bright, sunny day quickly turned gray, and thick, heavy clouds gathered overhead. The wind picked up, rustling signs and shaking the awnings outside his restaurant. John noticed a strange tension in the air, a kind of warning that something unusual was coming. He glanced at the weather forecast on his phone, only to see alerts of a severe storm approaching the city. John sighed. A storm like this could mean disaster for a small restaurant like his. Customers would likely stay home, deliveries might get delayed, and the streets could become dangerous. Still, he couldn't just close the doors early. He had to try to keep the restaurant running for those who might need a warm meal or shelter from the rain. As the first drops fell, tapping against the windows like tiny drums, John felt a mixture of anxiety and determination. He hoped the storm wouldn't be too strong, but deep down, he knew it would be a long and challenging night. By early evening, the storm had arrived in full force. Rain poured from the sky in sheets, soaking the streets and turning small puddles into rushing streams. The wind howled through the city, bending trees and scattering debris. Streetlights flickered under the pressure, and the usual hum of the city was replaced by the relentless roar of the storm. John watched from the safety of his restaurant, the warm glow inside contrasting sharply with the chaos outside. He felt a strange sense of awe and fear at the power of nature, realizing just how small and fragile life could feel in moments like these. Then he saw movement outside, a figure struggling against the wind and rain. At first, John thought it was someone trying to get home, but the person seemed to be struggling, slipping on the wet pavement, and struggling to carry something. Without thinking, John grabbed his raincoat and ran outside. His shoes quickly became soaked, his clothes plastered to his skin, but he ignored the discomfort. All that mattered was the person who clearly needed help. As he approached, he saw that the stranger was a man, soaked from head to toe, trying desperately to keep his balance against the storm's fury. John didn't pause to ask questions. He reached out, steadying the man and guiding him toward the relative safety of the restaurant's covered entrance. Every gust of wind made it harder to move, every heavy drop of rain stung his face, but John's determination didn't waver. Finally, they reached the doorway, and John helped the stranger inside. The warmth of the restaurant was immediately comforting, a stark contrast to the cold chaos outside. He offered the man a towel and a chair, making sure he was dry and safe. The stranger, shivering and exhausted, managed a small, grateful smile. As John looked at the man, he felt a mix of curiosity and concern. Who was this stranger? Why had he been out in such dangerous weather alone? The storm raged on outside, rain hammering the roof, wind rattling the windows, and John realized that this one small act of helping someone could change the course of the night, and, unknowingly, the course of his life. He poured a cup of hot tea for the stranger and offered some food, insisting that he stay until the storm passed. The man nodded quietly, too wet and tired to speak much, but John noticed a sense of relief in his eyes. For the next hour, John kept checking the stranger, offering warmth, comfort, and a listening ear. He realized that despite all his struggles with the restaurant and life's hardships, moments like this, the opportunity to help another human being in need, gave him a strange sense of purpose and strength. He felt alive, not because his business was thriving, but because he was doing the right thing at exactly the right moment. Outside, the storm continued to roar, indifferent to human struggles, but inside, John's small act of courage created a calm, safe space amid the chaos. Little did he know, the storm that had seemed like a disaster at first would turn out to be a turning point in his life. The stranger he had rescued was unlike anyone John had ever met, a person whose life circumstances and generosity would soon intersect with his own in ways he could never have imagined. But at that moment, all John cared about was making sure the man was safe, warm, and dry. The storm outside seemed endless, but inside the restaurant, something even more powerful was beginning to unfold, the first chapter of a life-changing encounter that would prove that bravery and kindness can have consequences far beyond what one could ever expect. John had never considered himself a hero. He was just a man trying to survive, to keep his restaurant open, and to make a life for himself despite the crushing weight of debt and disappointment. Yet, in that moment, standing in the pouring rain with the wind whipping around him, he acted purely on instinct. There was no thought of reward, no expectation of recognition, only the urgent need to help another human being. The stranger struggling in the storm was completely at his mercy, and John knew that if he didn't act quickly, the consequences could be severe. He grabbed the man's arm firmly but gently, guiding him through the slippery sidewalks. Every step was treacherous, puddles hid unseen cracks in the pavement, and the wind threatened to knock both of them off balance. John could feel the stranger trembling from cold, exhaustion, and fear. Yet, there was no time to hesitate. Each moment counted. His mind focused entirely on reaching safety, on getting this stranger out of the storm alive. The roar of the rain was deafening, and the gusts of wind pushed against them like invisible walls, but John's determination never wavered. As they moved forward, John noticed the stranger's clothes were soaked through, sticking to his body, and his shoes had filled with water. The man's face was pale, his teeth chattering uncontrollably. John's heart ached at the sight, but it only strengthened his resolve. He kept talking softly, reassuring him, telling him they were almost there. It wasn't much, but the stranger seemed to draw strength from John's calmness, as if he could sense that someone truly cared about his safety. Finally, they reached the restaurant's doorway, a small refuge from the chaos outside. John opened the door wide and ushered the man inside, feeling a sense of relief wash over him. The warm air hit their wet bodies like a gentle embrace, and for a brief moment, the storm's fury felt miles away. John quickly grabbed a towel and handed it to the stranger, helping him dry off as best as he could. Then he guided him to a chair by the counter, offering him a seat while he prepared a cup of hot tea. The stranger's gratitude was quiet but unmistakable. He didn't speak much, simply nodding and attempting a weak smile. John didn't need words to understand the depth of relief in that gesture. In that moment, John realized how fragile life could be. One wrong step, one hesitation, and things could have turned tragic. And yet, he also felt a strange sense of pride, not in the fame or success of saving someone, but in knowing that he had acted with courage and compassion when it mattered most. John made sure the man was as comfortable as possible. He offered a warm meal, poured more tea, and sat nearby, ready to help if needed. The storm outside continued to rage, rain thrashing the windows and wind bending the trees, but inside the small restaurant, there was a bubble of safety and humanity. John felt an unusual calmness settle over him. Amid the chaos of his own life, his failing restaurant, mounting bills, and personal doubts, this small act of heroism reminded him of what truly mattered: helping others, showing kindness, and acting bravely when the situation demanded it. As he watched the stranger finally relax, John thought about the risks he had taken. He had gone out into the storm knowing it could have been dangerous for himself. Wet, exhausted, and potentially slipping in the dark, he could have been injured. Yet, none of that mattered. The stranger's safety was the priority. And in that decision, John unknowingly set in motion a chain of events that would soon change his life forever. Little did he know, this simple, selfless act would not only save the stranger from the storm but also create an unexpected bond that would alter the trajectory of his struggling life. John had acted with courage without expecting anything in return, but sometimes, the universe has a way of rewarding such bravery in ways that no one can anticipate. In the middle of that chaotic night, John's heart was full, not because he had accomplished something remarkable, but because he had done the right thing, and that, in itself, was enough. Once inside the warmth of the restaurant, John finally had a moment to catch his breath. The storm outside showed no sign of letting up, and the rain pounded against the windows with relentless intensity. The stranger, still dripping wet, sat quietly at a small table near the counter, wrapped in the towel John had offered. His clothes clung to his frame, hair plastered to his forehead, and his expression was a mixture of exhaustion, gratitude, and something John couldn't quite place, an air of quiet composure, almost like someone who was used to facing challenges calmly. John quickly poured the stranger a cup of hot tea, hoping the warmth would bring some relief. He set it down gently in front of him and offered a simple meal he had prepared earlier for dinner. The stranger's eyes briefly flicked up, meeting John's gaze, and for a moment, there was silence, a pause heavy with unspoken understanding. The man didn't ask for anything, didn't demand attention or complain about his soaked state. Instead, he simply nodded his thanks, a small, sincere gesture that touched John more than words ever could. As John watched him, he felt an unusual curiosity stir. There was something about this stranger that was different. Maybe it was the way he carried himself despite being drenched and shivering, or perhaps it was the calm determination in his eyes that suggested he wasn't an ordinary passerby caught in a storm. John decided not to pry immediately. He knew that sometimes, people didn't reveal their stories right away. He offered the stranger a few blankets and sat down nearby, making small talk to help ease the tension. "Rough night, huh?" John asked lightly, trying to break the silence. The stranger smiled faintly, his voice calm but carrying a certain depth. "Yes, but thanks to you, I'm safe now." John shrugged, feeling a little embarrassed by the praise. "I just did what anyone would do," he said. "It's dangerous out there. I couldn't just leave you in the storm." The stranger nodded, but his eyes betrayed a hint of surprise. "Not everyone would have come out in that weather to help," he said softly. "It's rare to find such kindness these days." John felt a strange warmth in his chest at those words. He had always believed in helping others, even when he had little to give himself. In his restaurant, he often gave leftover meals to those in need, treated his staff like family, and offered a smile to anyone who entered, regardless of their appearance or social status. But hearing someone acknowledge it so sincerely felt different. It made the long hours, the struggles, and the stress seem worthwhile, even if just for this moment. For the next hour, John and the stranger talked quietly. John shared a little about his restaurant, the challenges he had been facing, and how the storm had complicated things further. The stranger listened attentively, nodding occasionally, and sometimes offering a few thoughtful comments. Despite being a near stranger, his presence was calm and reassuring, almost like a silent anchor amidst the chaos outside. John began to notice small things. The stranger's posture suggested confidence and poise, his speech was measured and precise, and there was a subtle air of authority in the way he carried himself. As the storm continued to lash the city streets, John couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter was more than just chance. There was a story behind this man, something larger than the ordinary, that John couldn't yet see. Yet he didn't press, understanding that some truths reveal themselves in time. For now, his focus remained on making the stranger comfortable and keeping him safe until the storm passed. And while John didn't realize it yet, the initial moments of this encounter were laying the foundation for something extraordinary. This was no ordinary stranger. The man sitting quietly in his restaurant would soon play a pivotal role in transforming John's life. In the quiet intimacy of that stormy night, with rain drumming against the windows and the smell of freshly cooked food in the air, a connection was forming, a connection built on trust, courage, and the selfless act of helping someone in need. John glanced at the stranger one more time and felt a strange sense of anticipation, as if the universe itself had orchestrated this meeting. Little did he know, this was the calm before a life-altering revelation, a moment that would soon show him that kindness, even in the smallest acts, can ripple into extraordinary consequences. The storm had begun to subside, leaving the city drenched and quiet in the aftermath. The streets outside were slick and empty, littered with fallen branches and scattered debris. Inside the warm glow of John's restaurant, the stranger finally seemed more relaxed. He sipped the hot tea John had offered and stared thoughtfully out the window at the rain-soaked city. For John, it was a rare moment of calm, a chance to breathe and reflect on the night's events. He had acted on instinct, guided by nothing more than empathy and courage, and now, sitting across from this man, he felt a quiet sense of satisfaction. But the calm was about to be broken in the most unexpected way. As the stranger put down his cup, he finally spoke, his tone measured but carrying a subtle weight. "John," he said, and the way he pronounced his name made it feel important, almost ceremonial. John blinked, surprised that the man knew his name. "Yes," he replied cautiously, unsure where this conversation was headed. The stranger leaned forward slightly, his eyes locking onto John's. "I need to tell you something," he said. "Something that may change the way you see tonight, and perhaps everything that comes after." John felt a jolt of curiosity mixed with unease. He had helped the man because it was the right thing to do, never expecting anything in return. What could this stranger possibly have to say that would matter so much? Then the stranger took a deep breath, and in a quiet but confident voice, he revealed the truth. He was a billionaire, a person of immense wealth, influence, and global recognition. He had been traveling incognito, visiting cities anonymously to escape the constant attention, scrutiny, and demands that came with his status. Tonight, he had been caught in the storm by accident, a rare vulnerability that had led him to John's restaurant. John froze. He had seen wealthy people before, read about them in the news, and even served a few in the past, but none of them had ever revealed their true identity so openly, especially not to someone like him, a struggling restaurant owner fighting against the odds. The stranger's revelation felt surreal, like a scene from a movie. John struggled to find words, his mind racing to process the enormity of what he had just heard. The billionaire continued, his expression calm but serious. I came here tonight with no expectation of help. I was caught in the storm, and I could have found shelter elsewhere. But the way you acted, without hesitation, without judgment, was remarkable. It's rare to see someone act purely out of kindness, especially when their own life is so full of challenges. That's why I need to meet you, understand you, and see how I can help. John's heart raced. He had spent years struggling to keep his restaurant open, worrying about bills, rent, and employees' livelihoods. He had never imagined that a single act of bravery during a storm could lead to such an encounter. His mind flashed back to the moment he had stepped outside into the pouring rain, his body soaked and his heart pounding. He had acted without thinking, but that decision, seemingly small and ordinary, had brought him face to face with someone who could change the course of his life forever. For a moment, John simply stared at the stranger, unable to speak. It was as if reality had shifted in an instant. The world he knew, the life of constant struggle, the fear of losing everything, was now intersecting with a world of unimaginable resources, opportunity, and potential. The stranger's presence alone carried weight, authority, and a subtle reassurance that John had never felt before. The billionaire leaned back, giving John a moment to absorb the revelation. I don't offer help lightly, he said. But I saw something in you tonight, courage, selflessness, integrity. These are qualities that money cannot buy, and yet they are rarer than any fortune I own. I want to support you, not just to save a business, but to help someone who deserves a second chance. John felt a mixture of disbelief, gratitude, and a hint of fear. Could this really be happening? After years of fighting just to survive, after nights spent worrying about the next month's bills, he was being offered not just help, but an opportunity to rebuild, to thrive, and to step into a future he had never dared to imagine. All from one simple act, rescuing a stranger during a storm. In that quiet restaurant, with the storm now behind them and the city glistening in the rain, John realized something profound. Sometimes, life has a way of rewarding courage and kindness in ways that are impossible to predict. The stranger before him was no ordinary person, he was someone whose influence and resources could open doors John had only dreamed of. And in that moment, the first spark of hope ignited, hope that his struggles, his sacrifices, and his integrity might finally be recognized and rewarded in ways beyond his imagination. The next few days were unlike anything John had ever experienced. After the stormy night, the stranger, now known to John as Mr. Harrison, kept in touch. At first, John wasn't sure what to expect. He had spent years facing disappointment and betrayal, so he was cautious about promises, especially those that sounded too good to be true. But there was something about Mr. Harrison, a calm confidence, a genuine warmth, and a sincerity that could not be faked, that slowly broke down John's walls. Their first official meeting was scheduled in the restaurant during a quiet afternoon. Mr. Harrison arrived without fanfare, dressed simply but elegantly, carrying an aura of authority that didn't intimidate but commanded respect. He greeted John warmly, shaking his hand firmly and making eye contact in a way that immediately put him at ease. I want to understand your world, he said. I want to see what drives you, how you work, and what challenges you face every day. From there, we can see what can be done. John was astonished. No one had ever shown such interest in his struggles before. Investors, banks, and even friends had only offered advice or criticism, but Mr. Harrison wanted to step into his life, to observe and understand before taking action. That small but profound gesture made John feel valued in a way he hadn't in years. For the first time, he felt that his hard work, integrity, and dedication had not gone unnoticed. Over the following days, Mr. Harrison spent time at the restaurant, talking to staff, watching John manage operations, and learning about the challenges of running a small business in a competitive city. He asked questions, not condescending ones, but thoughtful inquiries that showed he genuinely cared about the struggles John faced. He listened attentively as John explained the rising costs, the difficulty of attracting customers, and the financial pressures that threatened to close the restaurant. Mr. Harrison's presence was not just supportive, it was empowering. Then came the first offer of help, but not in the way John expected. Mr. Harrison didn't simply hand over money or solve the problems immediately. Instead, he provided mentorship, guidance, and strategic advice. He helped John refine his menu, suggested marketing strategies, and introduced him to local suppliers who could offer better rates. Every suggestion was practical, actionable, and tailored specifically to John's restaurant. Slowly, John began to see hope, a glimmer that his business could not only survive but thrive. What struck John most was that Mr. Harrison treated him as a partner, not a charity case. There was no pity in his eyes, no condescension. He recognized John's talent, resilience, and passion, and he wanted to amplify those qualities rather than replace them. That approach gave John a renewed sense of confidence. For the first time in months, he felt like he could breathe again. The fear of failure, the constant stress, and the overwhelming pressure that had haunted him were gradually replaced by a sense of possibility and determination. As weeks turned into months, John began to notice real change. Customers started returning, attracted by subtle improvements in service and menu quality. Positive reviews began appearing online, praising both the food and the warm, welcoming atmosphere. Employees were motivated, inspired by the newfound energy and attention to detail that John now had the resources to implement. And through it all, Mr. Harrison remained quietly supportive, appearing when needed but never overshadowing John's leadership. The bond between them grew stronger. Beyond business, Mr. Harrison became a mentor and friend. They shared long conversations about life, ethics, and resilience. John realized that this connection was about more than just financial support, it was about recognizing and nurturing human potential, about giving someone a second chance when they had worked hard, acted bravely, and shown integrity. It was the kind of support that transformed not just a business but a life. Through Mr. Harrison's guidance, John began to dream again, bigger than he had dared in years. He envisioned expanding the restaurant, experimenting with new cuisines, and creating a space that was more than just a place to eat, but a community hub. And with every step, he carried the memory of that stormy night, the moment when he had acted selflessly, without expectation, and unknowingly set in motion a life-changing chain of events. John realized that the greatest lesson of all was simple but profound: courage and kindness are never wasted. When he had rescued a stranger in the storm, he hadn't known it would lead to this. He hadn't known that one selfless act could change the course of his life. But through the life-changing connection with Mr. Harrison, he now understood that sometimes, the universe rewards those who act with integrity, compassion, and bravery, even in the darkest moments. Months passed, and the transformation in John's life became impossible to ignore. The once struggling restaurant, which had teetered on the edge of bankruptcy, was now thriving in ways John had never imagined. With Mr. Harrison's mentorship, strategic advice, and careful investment, John was able to rebuild not just the business, but also his confidence and vision for the future. Every corner of the restaurant reflected the changes. The menu had been refined, new dishes showcased his culinary creativity, and the atmosphere felt inviting and warm, drawing people in like a magnet. Word spread quickly. Local food critics and bloggers began visiting, captivated not only by the food but also by the story behind it. Customers, old and new, returned eagerly, often asking about the man who had saved a stranger during the storm and how that act had led to this incredible transformation. John's restaurant became more than just a place to eat, it became a symbol of hope, perseverance, and the power of human kindness. People were inspired by the idea that one courageous act could ripple into life-changing opportunities. John's personal life also saw a dramatic shift. The stress that had once consumed him, late nights worrying over bills, sleepless nights fearing the worst, was replaced by renewed purpose and energy. His staff, once overworked and demoralized, now thrived under the new system and improved management. They felt motivated and valued, inspired by John's journey from despair to success. For John, it wasn't just about profit, it was about creating a space where everyone, from the staff to the customers, could feel respected, welcomed, and appreciated. The success brought media attention. Local news stations and online platforms featured John's story, captivated by the narrative of a small restaurant owner who, through a selfless act during a storm, had encountered a billionaire who changed his life. Interviews, articles, and social media posts spread the tale far and wide, drawing attention to the restaurant and turning it into a beloved community landmark. John had never imagined his life could change so dramatically, but he carried each recognition with humility, remembering the night that had started it all, the storm, the stranger, the choice to act without expectation. Even with the fame and newfound prosperity, John never lost his core values. He continued to help those in need, support his staff, and maintain the welcoming, compassionate atmosphere that had defined his restaurant from the beginning. What had been a small act of heroism had now become the cornerstone of his philosophy, that kindness, courage, and integrity could transform lives, sometimes in ways far beyond what anyone could imagine. John also began mentoring other struggling small business owners, sharing his story and the lessons he had learned. He spoke about the importance of resilience, selflessness, and the belief that good deeds, even when seemingly insignificant, could create extraordinary opportunities. People were inspired not just by his financial success, but by his character and commitment to helping others rise alongside him. Through it all, John never forgot Mr. Harrison's quiet but steady presence. The billionaire's support had been invaluable, but what mattered most was the way he had recognized and nurtured John's potential. It wasn't just financial backing, it was guidance, belief, and trust that allowed John to rediscover himself and transform his restaurant into a success story that inspired countless others. Looking back, John realized that the stormy night was not just an event in his life, it was a turning point, a moment where courage intersected with opportunity, and where a simple act of kindness had unlocked doors he never imagined existed. The restaurant, once a symbol of struggle, had become a beacon of hope, demonstrating that even in life's darkest moments, integrity, bravery, and generosity could lead to unimaginable success. John had achieved more than financial stability, he had created a life that reflected his values, his dreams, and the extraordinary potential of selflessness. His journey stood as a powerful reminder, no matter how challenging the circumstances, acts of courage and compassion can change lives forever, sometimes in ways that exceed every expectation. Months after the stormy night that had changed everything, John often found himself sitting quietly in his restaurant, reflecting on the journey that had brought him here. The once struggling little restaurant, which had been on the verge of bankruptcy, now buzzed with energy, laughter, and the delicious aroma of carefully crafted dishes. Customers filled every table, staff worked with enthusiasm, and the community celebrated the restaurant as a place of warmth, hope, and inspiration. Yet, despite all the external success, John's thoughts always returned to that night, to the moment when he had acted without hesitation to help a stranger during the storm. He realized that the turning point in his life had not been the financial support, the mentorship, or even the opportunities that followed, it had been the choice to act selflessly. That single, instinctive decision to step into the rain, risking discomfort and danger to help someone in need, had set off a chain of events that no one, not even John, could have predicted. It made him understand a fundamental truth: true heroism doesn't come from recognition or reward, it comes from doing the right thing, even when no one is watching. As he reflected, John also thought about the people who had helped him along the way. Mr. Harrison's guidance, encouragement, and trust had been life-changing, but it had been John's own courage and integrity that had made him worthy of that support. He realized that kindness and bravery were not just moral choices, they were forces that could shape destinies. Even in his darkest moments, when failure and debt had seemed unavoidable, he had chosen to act with compassion, and in return, the universe had responded in ways he could never have imagined. John also considered the lessons he could pass on to others. He wanted people to understand that life often tests them in unexpected ways, that struggles and storms are inevitable. But it is in those moments of challenge that the character of a person truly reveals itself. By helping others, even when it seems inconvenient or risky, one can create ripple effects that extend far beyond imagination. That night had taught him that integrity, courage, and selflessness are invaluable, not just for personal fulfillment, but because they can profoundly impact the lives of others and sometimes even the course of one's own life. Looking around the bustling restaurant, John felt a deep sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the lessons learned, for the people who had supported him, and for the stranger who had unknowingly given him a chance to transform his life. He knew that success was not measured solely by money, fame, or recognition, but by the ability to stay true to oneself and to act with compassion, even when life seems unfair or overwhelming. That realization gave him peace, confidence, and a renewed sense of purpose. John also realized that his story was bigger than just him. It had become a symbol, a testament to the idea that one selfless act can ignite profound change, not only for the person helped but also for those who witness, support, and continue the cycle of kindness. His journey was proof that hope could emerge from despair, that courage could triumph over fear, and that generosity could open doors to unimaginable opportunities. In the quiet moments, John often thought about the stranger, the billionaire, who had changed the trajectory of his life. Yet he knew that the stranger's generosity was only part of the story. The real hero, in a sense, had been John himself, who had acted with integrity and courage when faced with a moment that required it. That understanding filled him with humility and awe. He had learned that sometimes, life rewards those who are willing to act selflessly without expecting anything in return. And so, John continued his work with renewed passion and purpose. He nurtured his restaurant, supported his staff, and extended kindness to anyone in need. He shared his story, hoping to inspire others to believe that even in the darkest storms, moments of bravery and compassion can create life-changing outcomes. He knew now, more than ever, that acts of kindness and courage have a power that far exceeds wealth, status, or fame. They have the power to transform lives, including one's own. Sitting by the window and watching the city bustle outside, John smiled softly. The storm that had once seemed terrifying and destructive had turned out to be the catalyst for a life beyond his wildest dreams. And in that moment of reflection, he understood the true moral of his journey: living with courage, integrity, and kindness is the surest path to a life full of meaning, purpose, and unexpected blessings.